It's a yearly exercise, filing tax returns, but it has a strict timeline. And for that, Steve Ten Bokum of the Expert Service is our guest. Steve, what are the key dates and moments for filing a tax return in the Netherlands?
Yes, basically we have a tax year that runs equal to our calendar year. So January 1st till December 31st is the period over which we always report. And when we do that is the year following that tax year, as of March up until the end of April. This is, as we call it, tax season, in which most of the tax returns are filed. I say most because it is possible to request an extension, for example. As tax consultants, we can request extensions automatically for all of our clients that give us even a year to file those returns.
Can you tell that date again? When is the deadline that it has to be?
April 30th, following the tax year. Okay. That's the regular period. And if you file after that, without an extension, you can get fined. But even with an extension and you need to pay an amount, tax interest will be calculated. So if you expect that you need to pay an amount in taxes, I would always recommend filing within the tax season to avoid that tax interest.
So anyhow, you have to do something before April 30th, the end of April. Yeah.
Yes.
And that is then the main moment, but you should not start just one day before because you may run into some problems and so on. What is the best way to start?
I would start looking for documents that you might need around your last wage payment of the year is a general one. So late December is a good starting point because of that point, once you've received your last payslip, for example, your employer can, in principle, draft your annual statement and he will most likely also provide that to you shortly. So that's where you will get that document. Also, near the end of the year / beginning of the year is when the financial institutions like banks and mortgage providers give the annual statement regarding mortgages, bank accounts. So around the change of the year is a good point to start looking out for the documents you might need.
To start looking out for it, but sleeping off your hangover on the 1st of January and then doing your tax return is not the best idea because you simply do not have all the information then.
Yes, exactly. So it's the point where you start collecting the documents that you need, but you can't draft in the chat. For the tax authority's website, you can only do this as of March 1st. So there's still a couple months at that point that you have to prepare. But even at Expat-service, if you go for our questionnaire, for example, we can already start filing them, for example, for 2024. But you don't need to draft it yet. It's mostly about gathering the documents, making sure you have all that prepared, and think back to the past year that has occurred. What has happened to you financially? What did you have? What did you sell? Things like that.
And that's also the moment that already in the portal of the Belastingdienst, tax return portal on the website, you can already see what the tax authorities know about previous year because they get directly from your employer.
Yes.
Quite a bit of information.
Yes, so basically they receive that as soon as the last wage payment, the wage run, we usually call this, has been done for the year. Then all the wage information has been processed and can be sent to the authorities. So at that point, they also have all that information. So if you get your information through their portal, then yes, it will most likely already be waiting there. But this is also the time in which you start receiving those documents in your mail. So just try to make like a small collection of this as you get them, so that when March comes around, time for you to file, you have everything ready already. And then you can start drafting the return.
And then looking into the portal, it's a matter of clicking on things. I always hate these portals if you do not know up front what kind of information you need to have gathered, because then on page number 7 you know that you need to still get something, and then on page 8 you have a need for something else. Yes. What is a way of preparing that or crawling through the tax return? Because you can swap between pages anyhow.
Of course. Mostly people's tax returns are very similar year to year. So you can always look back at the previous year, see what you had there and what information is recorded in that. And then just think, okay, where can I get that information? Or I had wages. Most likely I will have an annual statement then on which this is mentioned. But going through, looking back at last year and then thinking about, okay, did anything change as opposed to last year? That's often a more easy question to answer than what happened in the past year. But asking what has changed as opposed to the year before is a much easier question, and one that you'll be able to answer a lot easier as well.
So the first year is the hardest, although the tax system changes regularly. But in that first year, particularly if you're an international, you still own something in another country, you may have a bank account still. Those are things that you may need to collect information about.
Yeah, definitely. So if you know that you have like a bank account or an investment account, something similar with a foreign institution, then it might be worth already looking back at, okay, what was my balance on January 1st? Because usually you don't get these easy overviews that we get in the Netherlands, where it's just plainly listed January 1st, December 31st, what was the balance? You need to look for it at that point. So start on time with this, start trying to look for those things. And if it's something you need to request from that institution, preferably do so before the end of January, because then you will have the biggest chance of having everything ready by March. But even if not, note, you have March and April to file within the tax season. So that's all fine. One more thing I would like to add for people who come to the Netherlands, their first year of filing, is note down that your migration is also part of your tax return in that year. You need to report when you migrated, and basically that's the flipping point from when you become a resident taxpayer, and you need to report everything. So keep that in mind for the first year.
Now, I can imagine that you want to start out first by yourself and see whether you have problems in filing and finding out things. And then there may be a moment that you want to call for help. At the Expat Service, you don't like to have many calls just on the 29th of April, a day before the deadline.
Yeah, well, if you apply the day before the deadline, we will add you to our automatic extension ruling, but do note we will not be able to file your tax return before the deadline, purely because we most likely already have too many returns in the pipeline for that date at that point. And anything that gets added, yes, we will pick it up as soon as we can, but it's not always doable to do that within the time frame of tax season itself. So we will request an extension, but if you do need to pay, then that does mean tax interest. So we do recommend everybody start early and get everything done as soon as possible.
Steve Ten Bokum of the Expat Service, thank you very much.